All right. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Discussing Tabletop. As of course, September 30th, right at the tail end of September. Still 2023, but if it was a different year and I would be like it's 2024, then things would be weird because we would have like lost a year somehow in a week, or I would have been gone for like a year, and now I'm back suddenly, and it's all the same, and but anyway, no, it's just the 30th. Joining me today is, of course, Worm and Momo.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. We got some interesting topics to talk about. There's some weird things going on in the world of everything. So I guess, we got some normal stuff to talk about, but why don't we talk about the less normal and just dive into it with, did either of you see anything about the Evil Genius Games versus Netflix thing that was happening?
I saw there was a lawsuit. I don't know anything more.
Okay, so I've got the releases from Evil Genius Games and an article about it that I can link to you.
Rebel Moon.
Yes, over Rebel Moon. So, Rebel Moon, if you're unaware of it, is the Zack Snyder, not Star Wars-y thing that he's doing for Netflix. It's a sci-fi thing. I just thought it was that. And here is a article about it. Here's one of the ones. There's other articles you can probably find about it, but I would find all three of these things. So the idea is that Rebel Moon is going to come out soon as a movie on Netflix, and Netflix decided to go to Evil Genius Games to have them make a TTRPG based on it. So they did. They worked on it, and they started the beginning of this year. So they have not had a lot of time, and have managed to come up with, combined between the three books that they put together, about 1,000 pages.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of work in a short period of time that they put together. So, I have to figure out where the exact, they were at here it is. I think it's the Game Manufacturing Association Exposition. The Gamma. So they went to the Gamma, and now I can't really give the full bit of information because we're getting a lot of this basically kind of... There are certain things that we know and certain things that probably could be a little bit conjecture because, again, like, the exact agreements between Evil Genius and Netflix, we don't know. But effectively, Evil Genius says they put in an approval process for showing some things for Rebel Moon at the show. And the exact process, of approval from the company, we don't know that kind of thing, whether or not they actually had it in writing, whether it was just a verbal agreement, whether they just suggested it and there was no response from Netflix. There's something about it. But then they presented some of the, some pictures and some information along with some people from Netflix. And this is the big thing that kind of, makes this sound stupid. There were people from Netflix with them presenting it. So then Netflix broke the deal off with them and basically, cut the contract saying that they had leaked stuff. And so now Evil Genius is suing them because they're like, hey, no, you're breaking the contract.
We literally asked you if this was all right, and you signed things saying yes.
Well, the idea is, it sounds like, from what I was hearing about it, because I heard, who is it? I think it was, I saw the first thing I saw before I saw the 4 articles, was I think, Nerd Immersion. He got on the lawyer guy that occasionally floats around the table, one of the lawyer people that floats around the tabletop sphere, and has some knowledge on it. he talked about what the entire thing is. So if you want to deep dive into the legal side of things, that I would recommend. It's a longer video. It's more than what we're talking about here. But the basic idea is there was this thing. If you say, can I have this approval, and within a reasonable period of time you don't say yes or no, normally speaking, if it's the kind of thing that would be positively assumed, it's positively assumed. And that's kind of one of those other things about it. And you had people from Netflix that were helping them present, meaning that also kind of screams, you approved of this. So their reason for canceling it is kind of a little crazy.
It says in this article that you sent us, though, that Netflix had approved the showing of the art.
Well, that's the thing is, the way that it's presented in the case information,
okay.
it's
a
presented
reasonable assumption. Okay.
It's a reasonable assumption of approval because of the way that Netflix acted. Netflix, they asked Netflix, they, didn't get a response before the thing, and some people from Netflix helped them present it, which all screams Netflix approved it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is this weird situation where I think it's at very least Evil Genius is not trying to be very dickish about the entire suing of them, because it sounds like they're going for basically, we want what we would have been owed for this reasonably. And, we want to be able to have... Go ahead.
Pay us for our work, basically, is what they want.
Yeah, and we want at least a reasonable creative control over the, 1,000 pages that we created, Because that's another thing is, they did do a lot of work, and it's not without that people from the movie could not have seen some of this stuff and had ideas or have ideas for more stuff later. They were given a bit of information about the world of Rebel Moon, and they made more of a world. That's a lot of work, and that's a lot of IP-based stuff, so it's this kind of weird thing about it. Sounds like Netflix just wants all of it, and that's kind of the idea.
Basically,
the concerning thing to me about this article, and something that should be mentioned, is the tabletop RPG serves apparently is what is called a world bible, which is the contents for all of your lore in a world when you're designing a world. Sounds like that Evil Genius is alleging that Netflix just kind of took it and said, this is ours now, and we're not paying you.
I think basically it's like, here, do this work for us. They did the work, and then they're like, okay, well, we don't want this anymore, but then they're like...
they still want all of the lore you wrote for free.
That seems to be the real reason why they broke off the relationship, is to basically kind of just steal all the work. Because, again, if you look at the reasoning behind breaking the contract, there really isn't good reasoning for breaking the contract. Again, we don't know the finer details of the contract, so maybe there's some kind of stipulation that they could argue for. But the way that the information is presented to your generalized person, me, a layperson that doesn't really understand a lot of this, I'm like, wait a second, there's a reasonable good faith of you said, can I do this? No one said anything, but you got some people from you to help me out. So why is this bad?
And the fact that Netflix offered to pay them a lower sum of money to forget it ever happened kind of hints that Netflix thinks they probably won't win a legal battle over this.
Mm-hmm.
That's typically something you would do if you think you don't win. You would offer a lower sum of money than it would cost if you lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which means they probably know they made a mistake.
Yeah. They probably know.
At least their legal team's saying they are.
It's this weird thing that certainly I think it's lessons of the TTRPG space really should have been learned earlier on this year with the entire debacle of as much as again, Wizards was in the space. But it's sort of like, don't fuck with the community as a whole. This is like, messing with the community in a way. You're hitting up a hornet's nest. Yes. No one is going to just, take it lying down. This isn't the video game industry. Shots fired.
Pretty bad.
Yeah, it's just so interesting, that... And the thing is, really most of what they showed was, like, artwork. And a sample character. And that's not a lot to show off anyway. It's just a little flabbergasted. Like, Netflix has its share of, like, issues that it always goes through, and this is just, like, this is just kind of sad.
Yeah, I feel like people look way too... People think that, like, small tabletop companies are, like... Or even just tabletop companies in general. They always... I feel like a lot of, like, other companies are like, oh, you're just one of those all, like, nerdy companies who have, like, a small fan base, But it's like, no, actually, some of them can actually throw hands. I know what they're getting into.
I think it's also the same thing that, like, even if you don't say, like, necessarily throw hands, it's sort of like, people in the tabletop sphere are just reasonable when it comes to, hey, we want to do things reasonable a lot of times. I think we've been pretty good, so far, of keeping, like, a lot of major bad faith actors from doing anything in bad faith and keeping them alive. It was very evident with the entire debacle earlier this year with the OGL. It doesn't mean that we don't have some of that kind of bloodline that can exist there. That's the kind of corruption in a lot of companies, a lot of industries. But I do feel like we just tend to be... I think it's the laid-backness of tabletop means that, like, when our laid-backness gets disrupted, we get pissed off quick. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
So. We'll have to see how this goes. The Netflix really hasn't said a lot, it seems like, as a response, as of, like, most of these articles and stuff right now. So, maybe they'll respond, maybe they'll try to settle out of court for, like, a much higher sum they are, like, cheap-ass payoff. Or, honestly speaking, Evil Genius might kick them to court. If they have a strong enough case, they might want to set a precedent for something. And, as much as Netflix doesn't want that, sometimes it's good to try to set a precedent. That's the situation. Evil Genius is I guess I could say they're probably like would they be like a AA tabletop or a single A? They're still a higher end tabletop company, so they actually have the ability to do this kind of thing. Which, depending on who would have been chosen for Netflix, someone might not have been, honestly.
Evil Genius does a lot of high profile licensed games.
Yeah. I guess that's why they were called upon. They're the right kind of company for it. And honestly, their turnaround is pretty good.
They have Rambo, Total Recall, Pacific Rim.
They do a lot of stuff. It's good.
Yeah, so they have a lot of like IP you know about.
Mm-hmm. So, anyway, if we hear more about it, or if it just kind of gets settled, if it gets settled quietly, we're probably not going to hear a lot about it. But if we actually hear about a court case, we'll talk about it once they actually.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of if there's a settlement, a lot of the time it's like, and you'll stop talking about this as part of the settlement. Sometimes they're like, fine, you paid us enough.
So, here's an interesting one. Have you heard about D&D Beyond maps? No? Guess what? It sounds a lot like a VTT, but they're not calling it that.
Well, I mean, I haven't heard of it, but D&D Beyond is a VTT. As a note, it is one. Well, it's half of one.
It's half of one. Well, this is apparently the other half is like a browser source that dungeon masters of like the highest paid level can make interactive maps for their players. So it very much so sounds like it's just a VTT built into D&D Beyond, which they're already making
maps
a
with
VTT.
master tier subscription, and then type D&D Beyond registered games. When you subscribe, any future D&D content supported from your content library. So basically, yeah, you can basically just integrate it. It's just a VTT.
I mean, it makes
can only
sense.
do D&D.
Because this is something that D&D Beyond has dabbled in before, is as like a VTT, so them going the extra step is not a surprise to me. I'm just surprised it took this long.
It is also interesting that it is like on the cusp of them putting out their 3D VTT. It's
like still years away, so
I know
I want to point. Sorry, I just.
It's the idea that they're like, I think it is an idea that they are basically putting together their competitive market early. Maybe is the best way to think about it, because this is something they're putting out here, which honestly, even though people don't subscribe to D&D Beyond, a lot of people still use it for characters and stuff like that. And this is a convenient place to have it rather than export to something like any of the other popular ones, like 20, which I use, but any of the other ones too. You know, if this was the only thing they were doing, it would make sense to me, you know, as honestly a competition, but they're also doing 3D ones, so...
They're planning to do a 3D one. Also, I find it funny that Karlark and Shadowheart are used in the thumbnail from the official D&D Beyond announcement of it. From the, definitely trying to capitalize on the, Baldur's Gate success.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Karlark and Shadowheart are from Baldur's
What was it that I heard someone talk about when I saw this mentioned within the people I follow? It was the fact that one of the things that we should remember with this coming out here is, and it's not like necessarily, I wouldn't call it nefarious because it's not really nefarious, but it's the business. It's a core part of the business strategy that they're working towards. Of basically becoming a superior, like basically capitalizing and taking over part of the VTT market. And this is like a step in thing because when we were doing a lot of the arguments with OGL and stuff, they were always putting forth like, we have control over stuff on a VTT.
Yeah,
they always mentioned it.
Yeah, they really wanted to, like, control their own content to, like, a very high level, and it's like, anyone who's even using our content will have some... Like, I know the first one was basically like, if you use our content, you are subject to us doing things as we see fit.
And the thing is, like, as they dropped it away from, like, a more generalized thing, they always kept that core of the VTT in a lot of their things until we went in to create a comic. So, like, yeah. I think it's also the idea that they have a new version of D&D coming out. Will we only see that on D&D Beyond? Will we see this new one on 20, on any of the other VTTs? Or is it going to just be a D&D Beyond maps / their 3D VTT? There's like a lot to say about this that we don't know.
I doubt that they're going to just stop selling normal 5e books, considering they are compatible, like, entirely. Because they didn't stop selling 3.0 books when 3.5 came out.
True.
So I don't think they're going to shift away from that. And I think it will integrate fully, but I think that this will always remain an inferior product because it is a subscription service, and there are better VTTs like Foundry, which is a one-time purchase, or Roll20, which is free.
Like,
yeah, I mean, and they don't even have. I was about to say they don't even have. They have a fog of war, but they don't have like the light, the automatic light thing that Roll20 has, which I think that's now free for Roll20, right?
I don't think it's free yet. I think they might be planning on making it free.
They've got a lot of things in Roll. Like, the thing is, you can still do a decent job in Roll20 with a lot of stuff with just their free stuff. I pay for a subscription to Roll20, but one of the reasons was also more space to upload because I have a billion pictures. And then also, like, I did, like, having the ability to transfer my own characters actually from the character vault. And these two things combined with a couple more options for map building, I like.
And I like doing absolutely ridiculous things, like I'm trying to work on making my own character sheets.
Yeah, but I also understand,
like background programming character sheets.
If I wasn't doing a bunch of that stuff, I honestly don't really need it too much, you know? Like, if I cleared out a lot of my space of pictures, and, you know, like, I didn't feel like a lot of those other things, I could probably cancel my subscription and just, whenever I want to get all the characters out, just make a subscription and transfer them.
Yeah, I mean, I run 2 whole-ass D&D games, and I don't subscribe to Full 20.
Yeah.
So you don't really need it.
Yeah.
I don't run any right now, and I subscribe.
Mm-hmm. But again, like...
I will again in the future.
And yeah, both the 3D VTT and maps are in alpha, so these are, like, really early versions of it. But most likely, yeah, we will probably see maps out first, rather than the other 3D VTT, just because, you know, development...
One is, like, when they showed it off, this year, when they had the Creators Conference that everyone booed them at, it wasn't even an alpha.
Mm-hmm. Like, apparently, some people have had a chance to see the VTT, the actual alpha now, and, like, I'm sorry, okay, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. Like, there apparently was... I haven't seen anything much on it, but apparently, like... Because it's, like... This tabletop sphere is pretty big. I don't know everybody. You know, some people were just basically kind of poo-pooing it. But I'm like, it's goddamn alpha. Yeah. You know, fucking...
But it's an alpha you have to pay, like, the top tier to get access to.
Well, I mean, for the 3D VTTs, people have seen that.
Oh, that
the
one,
new alpha of that. But I'm sorry, like, if that's, like, Alpha 1 or Alpha 2... Go back and play, like... I played 7 Days to Die. These early alphas were bad!
People outside of the gaming space, specifically the video game space, often don't really understand how much work it goes into making a virtual product. If the alpha isn't full of features, it's because the alpha is the base layer, right? You don't put all the features in, you start with a foundation, and then you start adding to that and changing. And that takes a long time, and it's also very expensive.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to judge these 3D virtual tabletop until I see a finished product. Because as someone who has publicly beta tested things, someone who's taken part in early access, someone who has friends in the game industry, can't really judge something when it's in development.
Yeah, I agree.
It does depend on the game, though. Especially depending on the philosophy of beta development that the game people subscribe to. Because I know there's, like, various ones, such as... There's some people who say alpha is for introducing features, beta is for fixing bugs, and then you have the full release. Then I know there's others who's like, no, it's basically all just a stream. It's basically how much percentage complete you think the game is. Alpha's like, you know, below a certain point. So it depends. But yeah, no, like if it's alpha though, never judge it. Like alphas, betas you can judge a little bit more, depending. And then full releases, then you can feel free to sling as much dirt as you want.
Yeah, alphas are typically not for mass consumption.
You know, and I've always kind of said this about their 3D VTT, and I'll say it now kind of about maps. In particular, it's their option to try to, like, corner an area of this market. That's fine. Beyond that...
If they do a good enough job, maybe they could, but they better do it right.
Yeah, if they're not... And the fact is, if they're not, like, microtransaction the hell out of 3D VTT, which people worry about. If they don't do that, I'd be less worried about it, too. Like, if they would just sell, like, here's packs or something, that's still microtransaction, but it's not like I have to buy an individual spell or monster. There's a level of things that, like, I could be like, especially with assets like this, I'm maybe, like, kind of like, meh. Because, again, like, they do a lot of that on Roll20. They have, like, packs of, like, tokens and objects and stuff.
But also, here's what I like about Roll20. I mean, there's some obviously introduced by people like official D&D has stuff in the store, but a lot of the art in the store is done by individual creators, and you can just buy the ones you like, and chunk of the money goes to them, which I actually like about Roll20, which is why I never really bother. Like, I'm like, you know what, I like this, I'll buy it. You know, I don't feel guilty about it.
The one thing that I also feel like may be a make or break for me for the 3D VTT is we don't know if there'll be creators that can do that kind of thing. There's so much that we don't know about it now, not only with its presentation, but how it's going to come to us in the public. Maps is fine. It's convenient. It's whatever.
I suspect they won't have third-party stuff because they're going to make it as solely D&D as possible, I presume. Which means they're probably going to want to have control over what's in it. But then again, you also have... But then you do have people who, like... And then you see the troll in a bikini, and so, like, if you can somehow buy someone's, like, 3D rigged art of a troll in a bikini, that'd be nice, but...
I mean, it's going to come down to a lot of stuff. We don't know. This is like... I feel like there's almost the alpha step they're taking towards their own 3 VTT by putting this one, which again, as you said earlier, Momo, it was half of VTT already on D&D.
Yeah.
So
like, you could already roll off of it and stuff. So it was already halfway there.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm surprised they didn't do this sooner, personally. It really wouldn't have been a lot more for them to add this.
It might be that this might be kind of like also like a little bit of like a secondary backup, you know? Because this is at least, you know, encouraging people to pay for the master tier D&D Beyond. At least DMs to do it. In order to run off of here. And it might also be like they're worried that they're not going to capture as much. I don't know. There's like so many like why they're also doing this, but
it feels like they're hedging their bets. It really does.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And I think that it just kind of shows that, at least in my opinion, this might actually be a good sign, because it means they have been shaken up a little bit by all the dumb stuff they've been doing and the backlash from it.
I think
maybe
what will end up happening, and it's a speculation to the future of D&D Beyond, but I could see when this new VTT of theirs comes out, it'll have probably total integration with D&D Beyond. So you will likely not have to purchase what you purchased already on D&D Beyond anew.
That makes sense.
Wizards owns both of them.
Yeah. So yeah, no, definitely that makes sense that if they've got you know, both of them, they at least have, you know, foot for the they're in a good spot. So we'll see though. Again, like honestly, it's
we'll see this again.
We'll see it when it becomes farther than an alpha, and honestly, the question will be: will this bring more people back to D&D Beyond, or will it just be the people that didn't leave, you know, that are going to take advantage of it? I think the biggest problem of D&D Beyond and the D&D VTT is going to be that it's only D&D. And D&D is a gateway drug. It's not the end result of what most people play. And there's a lot of D&D which isn't core D&D. You know, there's so much products out there related
so much
to D&D.
homebrew and
so much homebrew, and you can't do that on something like the 3D VTT if you have an absolute control over it. And that might be their biggest downfall, is that they won't, as you said, they'll hold the reins and won't open it up to anybody, like putting in a troll in a bikini. You know?
No.
We do have a few more things that are a lot less, I guess, controversial talky to talk about. You know, just some nice, simple, newsy topics. There's a deluxe adventure out for Pathfinder. We don't see as many of those because normally we find their mini adventures, their Pathfinders, or Pathfinder Society and Starfinder Society adventures, and then their adventure paths. I don't know how many levels that's going to be, but being a $25 book usually tells me that is a little bit more than your average adventure. So it's a ancient, dealing with more ancient random stuff brought up from the depths of some town that's come up in the middle of this ancient empire. It's honestly, it's like I don't want to say 90% of it. That's a large percentage of Pathfinder adventures is, hey, something from the ancient past gets woken up. Well, we gotta deal with it now. Evil's stirring under Rusthenge. New items, new character boundaries, some new monsters, region's history. I like little adventures like this. I like it when they do these. And this is for first level one, so I kind of wanted to shout it out and be like, hey, could be an intro for adventure for your characters, for some players, get them into it. That's a little bit more than just the beginner's box. Not just, those beginner boxes are fine. They are just really mixed bag when it comes to adventures. Maybe cut their teeth on something a little more solid.
Yeah. I actually own the Starfinder beginner box. I got it in a Humble Bundle.
I might have that.
By the way, is for 1st to 3rd level.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't see that.
I had to scroll down in the comments and find one of the Paizo people.
Oh, good. One of the Paizo people.
Yeah, the creative director responded to it.
Oh yeah, James Jacob. I see him. Yeah. That's actually not a bad a range of time too. From 1st to 3rd level is like a big chunk of like an adventure path adventure we have too. So it has some meat to it. And something to look into. So we do have, which I probably should look up the original, but I can give the backer kit and the Kickstarter weight age, because we're getting a TTRPG based on a board game, which sometimes we do. But the Tainted Grail dark fantasy board game, which was very like King Arthur folktale-y, apparently came out in 2019, has been popular enough to get I'll put the Kickstarter page its own TTRPG about the world. And I mean, like, I'm gonna say, like, I'm 99% sure throughout the years I've been doing this show, at this point in time, people have done kind of more Arthurian myths in TTRPGs before, so I will be interested to see how they will do this differently. I guess it's 100. Avalon fell 100 years ago. Anyway, yeah, you're becoming Guardians of Avalon, marked by Arthur's power, meant to defend humanity in difficult time against the island forces. Guess they're implying, like, the rest of the world died to plague, and, like, Arthur ran with a bunch of people to Avalon, and now, Avalon's got, like, a cataclysm that struck it, so now you're, like, survivors of humanity trying to rebuild the greatness that was, I guess, Arthur and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting sounding story, just complex. So,
guess when you need a bagel. How far spread is that store? That might just be like a local thing, actually.
Bagels?
There's a bagel store near me. There's 2 bagel stores near me. There's a small franchise around here called Avalon.
Oh, yeah, no, okay.
Wait, that might just be a Southern California thing.
It could very well be. Because, like, I don't know many bagel places, unfortunately, which sadly could be.
I don't have any in Avalon near me, so I assume it's a California thing.
Oh yeah, no, this is actually like, this isn't even just California. This is like a Orange County only thing. Okay,
They have a small, locally controlled franchise.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's both a spin-off apparently of the board game and also like set in the same world. Which apparently is also a video game series. Also,
Yeah, there's video games of it. One's a deck builder, one's an RPG.
wow. I guess that makes sense then that they're doing an RPG if they've already like established a bit of a world in other media. All right, that makes sense.
It's like
a lot
a pretty popular board game.
Yeah. So, honestly, okay, neat. Where is
Grail? What was that? That's not related to that one? What was that game called? There was an Arthur game that came out a lot longer ago, like 2009, I think? 2008? I don't remember what that one was called.
I can't spell video for the life of me. I tried, and it just... Let's see here. Tainted Grail, Fall of Avalon, Tainted Grail, Conquest.
Shadows of Camelot, that's the one I'm thinking of. Shadows over Camelot. I don't think that's related.
No. Don't think it is. Just trying to like look up more stuff on. They don't see the other Tainted Grail game, but there's two of them apparently. Neat. They did seem at least the
Tainted Grail video game too.
Yeah, Conquest and
Oh yeah,
came out in 2011, and that one came out. I guess this one might have come out the same year. No, that one. There's a video game that came out earlier this year. That's an open world RPG. Oh my god, I may have heard about that name and not even thought about it because it's just sort of like one of these things that's like not my wheelhouse, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not a like first/third person action game person most of the time. So, but regardless, yeah.
That card building thing came out in 2011 or 2021. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's had some moniker of success and a big thing. So now I guess an RPG. So cool. I didn't realize they had video games also about this. That's something I missed. So, looks like they've been doing a lot more.
First-person one that came out in 2023.
Yeah. Very new.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you want to keep an eye on it, they've got the backer kit kind of thing where you can kind of keep an eye out. You can preview the core book, and you can keep an eye out on the launch page for Kickstarter if this interesting. If you either liked the original board game, or honestly, if you got into video games and want to see more of the world, a good place to do it. So I will be curious as to what kind of adventure it ends up being, but we'll have to wait and see. I had to talk about this just because I gotta be honest. It's playing Fallout 4 made me want to talk about this, and it's the Fallout role-playing game Settler's Guidebook. I guess you can build your own settlements.
Well, I mean, this is fine for the tabletop RPG.
I mean, I don't mind it either. It might work better than Fallout 4.
I mean, Fallout 4's settlement building doesn't have a UI.
It doesn't.
Fallout 76's settlement building is a little bit better, but it's also still pretty bad. And you aren't trapped in a world of Todd Howard's creating when you play the tabletop RPG.
Very true.
Is a rule set that's kind of been needed for a little bit because a big part of the Fallout universe is building settlements.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this makes sense.
It looks as like they do have more information for characters, new origins, Commonwealth Minuteman, New California Republic, robots, more of them, settler building, stuff for more companion-based stuff, automatrons, weapons. So there's a lot to it. It's more than just the basic things. And, like, I guess they're doing some more information on both East and West Coast, which is actually nice, too. I mean, it's the two areas that we have from the game's
Oh,
actual
we have
lore.
more, but Bethesda refuses to acknowledge them.
Wait, we have more? Where?
We have
We
more-
have one in Illinois, we have one in Texas, but we don't talk about either of those because Bethesda.
Oh, is that? Yeah, those are the ones made by the previous.
I mean,
owners.
the first 2 Fallouts were made by a previous group, but they're
Yeah.
actually have a
Yeah.
lot of their lore acknowledged. But so we're saying
only
like
about half of Fallout Tactics is canon. So. And then
Oh.
Fallout Brotherhood of Steel is something Bethesda is wants to mention, and I don't blame them. It is not a good video game.
Okay, I'd love to see Fallout. This is something I'd love to find out about Europe
yeah,
or China.
or anywhere else in the world.
Alright, it's
Yeah.
time for Momo's Fallout Lore Corner. There was going to be a Fallout game set in China. It was called
I believe
Fallout
it.
Extreme, and it was going to be ruled by a ghoul emperor. The game was canceled because the company went under.
Interesting.
There was going to be a first-person shooter set in Europe, which was going to be set just after the Great War, and focused mostly on scavenging supplies. However, that was also canceled because then Interplay died.
Mm.
Yeah, but we have like very little information. We know that there was like more countries that nuked each other
Yeah.
than just America.
I mean, the
whole
first-
world was wiped out.
The intro to the first Fallout game mentions a lot of the world lore. Like how the European Union nuked the Middle East and then exploded themselves in a big old civil war. All for oil.
Yeah. So anyway, but I'd love to see. I'd love the. I mean, I know that it's mostly focused on America. I mean, it is kind of the whole point of Fallout.
Yeah,
is
it's
Cold
Fallout is like
War.
a satirization of
I'm
the American mindset.
I really, I'm just gonna joke about it.
Hmm.
Give me Fallout Australia. Give me my dire platypus.
don't think you're ready for that, Kansas.
I have the dire
I don't
platypus
think
for
you're
Records of
ready for a
Evil.
game set in Australia.
I just make my version of
Australia
Australia Fallout in
Already-
Australia.
Australia already is a Fallout wasteland.
Just-
They got
I mean,
cat-sized spiders that
I mean,
gallop.
They do.
They do gallop.
I want to see an irradiated kangaroo.
Yeah, it'll be gigantic and probably flesh-eating. Because that sounds like something that,
I mean, literally
If-
in Fallout 76, they made a bat into a dragon.
they make everything want to eat you in Fallout games. It's sort of like,
The forced evolutionary virus that was actually... I'm just going to shut up now because I could go on for hours.
that's fine. I accept. It's the thing that, like...
We all have our one thing that we know a lot about of.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, mine is about a video game from the 1990s. And
I-
just the 1990s in general.
I have several of those topics as well.
I've been deep diving more and more into both Pathfinder lore and World of Darkness lore over the years, and it's a rabbit hole of insanity that gets just darker and darker. Especially
I
World
have
of Darkness stuff.
Yeah, I actually was like that for Elder Scrolls, but
That's-
that has faded, especially since I never played like the Elder Scrolls Online.
Mm.
Didn't miss much.
I know. I kind of still want to try it out though.
It's like fine now, but it's
I
still not-
participated in the beta.
never really got better, but it got better stories, but not really like mechanically better.
Anyway,
Stories is half of it. So yeah, the Fallout role-playing game Settlers Guidebook is actually a really interesting sounding book and probably adds a really good layer that's needed to your Fallout RPG adventures.
We'll
So,
probably buy this book.
I,
Buy
I,
a Fallout game one day.
yeah, I highly recommend this one for when it comes to the Falls.
and maybe Bethesda will read this content and actually integrate better mechanics.
No, they have to make Starfield Anniversary Edition first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I just want to throw it out there as a note because it was kind of like a little bit of an interesting thing, and it's technically World of Darkness adjacent, which is a big thing here on my channels. So, the Werewolf Apocalypse is at least very well coming to Fantasy Grounds so far, for when it comes to the 5th edition. It's the first virtual tabletop that is going to get the Werewolf Apocalypse, and they're getting it like a direct connection. A lot of RPGs, like stuff that ends up on Roll20, is kind of like shanked together by a little bit of what the company does and a bunch of what people do. Direct support is really nice when it comes to on a virtual tabletop.
Yeah, but sadly with Fantasy Grounds, they're actually exactly what everyone's afraid D&D will do, where they basically have to have their hands in every pie they make, and then they charge for it. I ran I ran a Fantasy Grounds game just to kind of try it out. First off, it was really expensive because you had to buy like the D&D module, then you had to buy like the game system I wanted to run, which was the Curse of Strahd. So it's like then I had to buy the game, and then I had to buy the Fantasy Grounds, then I had to buy like the extra more expansive thing, so that way my players didn't have to buy Fantasy Grounds.
Wow.
I think the whole thing was like...
That's why you just get Foundry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just noticing, like, at the bottom of the page, they talk about how, like, they really do mention that, like, there'll be additional add-ons and additional costs and stuff, and they're like, oh, you want, like, your Vampire 5e, and then every time I see Hunter the Reckoning 5th edition, I'm like, it's the 2nd edition. It's really... I know you want to call it 5th edition because they're all 5th edition in your brain, but really, we looked it up, only Vampire and Werewolf are actually the 5th editions. You brain, it just breaks my soul. It just breaks it a little bit for the stupidity of it. You're capitalizing on D&D, and it's not good.
Yeah, point. So that's the one thing I don't like about Fantasy Grounds. Is they do that, and I tried running it, and honestly, there were certain things in my mind that could have still been done better, that like Roll20 did better. Like their maps are not as great as Roll20's.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of sad kind of thing, it sounds like. And it's this thing of like, they're partnering directly with Fantasy Grounds, so how they'll come or not come to other TTRPGs is kind of in a question. But it also...
They'll come to Roll20 because anyone can make a sheet for it and then put it on.
Yes. It's just not going to have a lot of, like, little extra things and stuff to it. Just be the basic, I guess, program for the sheet rules, Oh, it rolls these dice. There you go.
Depends on who makes it. It's usually... That's usually what... Like, basically, the support for it determines... Yeah. The support for it is what basically determines the, quality of the VT. So basically, like, the more people who want to play it, the more likely someone will pitch in to actually make it good. So, yeah. The whole, Roll20, it really depends. Yeah. So you can... Yeah. So they got, yeah, that's actually why Traveler doesn't have a lot of good stuff on Roll20. And when I've actually started looking into how to make my own sheets, because I want to actually have a decent Traveler sheet when I run Traveler on stream sometime in the future.
So, I guess it's like, if you really want the decent, well, in quotation, if you really want the most, supported version of this, you'd have to go to Fantasy Grounds, but you usually be able to find stuff on those. It's just not going to have the same kind of support. It's not going to have the, copies of the books, or, like, all the little other things, or, like, the rules sets that you find, for, like, when I'm playing D&D 5e, when it's got the tools where you can just, or Pathfinder, where it's just got the tools that you can reference it in the thing, where it can be like, oh, what the heck does this do? What the heck does that do? You're not going to have that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But who knows if we'll see more VTTs in the future. This is at least the one they're partnering with. It might be their own movie. I don't know if they've done it, but hey. Alright, hey, cool. We could talk about how about I bring about this topic, because it is related to something we talked about today, and it's something kind of interesting that, to talk about. And, we talked about the, the Tainted Grail, the board game, and how it has a lore which became enough for an RPG. There is lore and story in non-RPG tabletop. in a lot of board games and stuff. What is the kind of impression on how much of that do we need, really? And, like, is it always a well-established kind of thing? Because that's kind of like an idea to think about. Like, you know, you have something that is a little bit story-driven, like, let's say, like, the Betrayal at House of Hill. That's an example that I can think of that has a story, but the story is usually like, this is the adventure, it's the story you're having there, and there's just, you got some characters doing it. What's your Scooby-Doo gang getting up to this week? Which one of them's being possessed by the dark gods and murdering everybody else? But it seems like something then like your Tainted Grail has like this huge thing of like story. What's your two experiences with, you know, this kind of stuff, with story when it comes to something other than a TTRPG, it's just a normal board game?
A board game with lore?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Like, I don't think there are too many that I've... I mean, funny enough, Shadows Over Camelot, the one that I mentioned that I was wondering if it was related to, does have a good amount of, like, lore-ish stuff. But it's, again, it's just very Arthurian, and the story is self-contained.
I mean, like, Gloomhaven has lore and a setting.
Yeah.
That's, like, one of the best, you know, board games, like, ever made. Yeah.
So, I mean, that kind of says, is it, like, something that is very... does that mean it is something that should be seen as very important, then, to that kind of thing?
I would say have a board game that's set in a specific world. It very much just depends on the kind of board game, right? Like,
I guess that's true.
A dungeon crawler like Gloomhaven, which is set in a very specific world, you do need the lore there, but for something like, I don't know, Terraforming Mars, you don't really need lore for that.
Settlers of Catan, you're just people settling on this place called Catan. Call it a day, you know. That's pretty much all you really need to know. But again, like, sometimes there are, honestly, which sometimes surprises me, where you'll bring out a board game, like, let's say Settlers, and I'll look at it, and then it'll be like, what is this, like, 2 pages of lore that you're giving me about this world? That, you know, what? That happens sometimes. And it's, interesting, but also a little bit of, like, do we need that sometimes? Like, yeah, I agree. Something like a, like like Gloomhaven, certainly it probably calls for a little bit more lore, a little bit more story, a little bit more everything, because it is a very story-based adventure, you know? But I guess the thing is, does the extra story detract from some of those simpler games, you know? Or is it just something that's there, sort of?
I mean, like, the different video games with lore, I mean, yeah, because you've got basically a few different aspects, where there's some which use lore, such as, like, you know, Lords of Waterdeep, or Shadows over Camelot, where it's like there's existing lore, like Arthurian lore, and then there's those, and then there are those which kind of are self-contained, like Betrayal at House on the Hill, and then you've got ones that, like, are built into, like, a universe, and I am having besides the Grail one, I'm having trouble, like, thinking of, like, other ones.
The ones built in the universes tend to lean more into the wargaming aspect of things.
Yeah, I think miniatures games usually will have a lot more lore.
Miniatures games need lore because they're usually attached to something and can usually be played over a wider campaign of games.
And, like, I can think of, I like the board game Everdell, which is basically, like, a little, like, your little animals building a village or something that you have to do it over a year to survive the season or something. It's kind of what it's saying. Like, you know, oh, we have to build up our village to survive the next year. That's, like, the entire story of it. And it adds, like, the little cuteness and things like that to the entire thing. And then the question becomes, like, is the game in this case? Because we have all this little stuff with, like, oh, the cute little animals are trying to, like, survive for winter, you get 4 seasons, etc., etc. Does that match the mechanics? Or is it, like, its own... Would the board game be the board game without that? Maybe it's another thing to talk about. Because certainly, a war game becomes individual because of the lore built into it. But, like, you've got a lot of board games that can kind of have, like, facelifts of themselves a lot of times. Like, it's this Catan or that Catan because you don't need the lore. But then you got something in the middle that provides a bunch of lore. Does that matter then in that case? Or is it just a fun superfluous extra thing?
Like, a board game I'm quite fond of, I'm pretty sure neither of you played it, even though I've talked before, is Spirit Island. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but I have mentioned it before.
Yeah.
It's like, came out like in 2017. It's a board game where you defend... It's a cooperative board game. It's not a competitive. Where you are natural spirits or deities of native islanders defending the island from European settlers. Each of the deity has lore written on their card of who they are and what their, like, brief history is. Each of the factions, which aren't historically accurate factions, they are like England, France, Spain, Russia, and then for some reason the Habsburg monarchy is there. Not sure why. Austria-Hungary never had colonies, but they did briefly rule Spain.
Aren't they, like, landlocked?
Well, no, they weren't landlocked when they were Austria-Hungary.
Okay, they were Austria-Hungary.
They had, like, Slovakia and Croatia, so they did have access, but they were locked in the Mediterranean by the British.
Yeah. So.
But that's a game you very much cannot separate the lore from it, because that's the core facet of the game. Otherwise, you don't have a game.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a game that I know about called, you might know about it because we covered it here once, called Stuffed Fables, where you're basically stuffed animals protecting your sleeping child from monsters under the bed.
Yeah, I remember that one. That's one that was kind of, I think, mentioned long ago at this point in time. Didn't they do an RPG for that one too? It was started as a board game, and
I think they did. Let me look.
That's another one where, like, it had enough lore to make a transition. But yeah, certainly that's that kind of thing of, like, we made a lot of lore, let's make an RPG, which I guess is sometimes that happens too for a little bit of these worlds. It's like, well, we wrote a lot of lore, and it's not really that helpful in our board game. Let's make a TTRPG. I guess that's not really the thought pattern, but I feel like when you do that kind of thing, it sometimes leads to that. When I have, like, a crap ton of lore about this world that I've just sort of put together, and the question on how much that was actually, needed, okay, cool, it can help.
I don't see a board game for this one.
Was it just a TTRPG?
No, it was just a board game.
Oh, so they didn't do it. I think there was, like, yeah, I think it's just the... Oh, because it was Z-Man. I think there was something else that was a little similar to that I remember that, like, that shit. I can't remember what that one was. But yeah. Oh, Z-Man. Yeah. Okay, yeah. There definitely was another game that was another stuffed animal game that I remember, but I can't remember what that one was called. The Stuffed Fables was... It's cute, it's got an interesting little bit of a story, and it's got, like, a reason, but again, like, it's that idea that I like lore in things, but sometimes I also recognize when you do too much lore in things, sometimes too. It's that entire juxtaposition of, like, I guess it's the argument of, like, hey, in D&D, how many billions of times can we visit and talk about Baldur's Gate or Watergate or, Neverwinter? Oops, all Sword Coast, and there's a lot of stuff for them. way too much stuff sometimes, because it's just like, well, it's another thing about that place there, great. But then it comes down to that kind of like idea that we're overblowing that kind of thing. And could story... Here's a good question. Could story detract from gameplay? In just something like a board game? Certainly I don't think that's the case for something like a miniatures game. But for, let's say, a card game or something else.
As long as you don't go... In my opinion, as long as you don't need to know the lore to play the board game well, then it should be fine.
Okay.
I think if the... Yeah, like, the premise of a board game is sometimes just a fun ambient thing, and if there's, like, lore in the rulebook, or the cards have lore, or you can build up lore in other ways, then that's, I think, fine. But if it's all, like, you know, you need to, like, do this... Oh, wait, hold on. I just remembered there's another game, like Timekeepers or something? What is that one where you travel through time?
Oh, yeah. I did it when I was doing Sundays at Tabletop. Yeah. Yes. Where, unfortunately, I could probably do one of the adventures again now, because I remember bits and parts of it, but I do not remember enough to, like, you know, actually, like, guide things through. You know, like, I could be like, oh, for the first adventure, I remember one thing, kind of, main thing. The rest of it, not sure about. I could probably replay that again. But again, like, it's one of those things, it's been years since I played it. You really can only play it once. I can't remember the name about it. I'm opening the wrong window, the one that is not... Time Stories.
Time Stories, that's what it was.
Time Stories. Time Stories is one of those ones where it's sort of like... There were things about it that certainly I feel like it might be on that borderline of too much story. Because, like, it's that unfortunate thing that, like, it really wasn't replayable very well, but the way the story was presented almost means you needed to know and pay attention to things in order to get an outcome that's actually good in the adventure, but you can really only play through it once, which makes it really like kind of like a kick in the balls kind of thing.
Yeah, and then you know everything. And if you try and play it again, then you already know too much to make it... Yeah. That might be a good example of one where the lore kind of hurts it in a way.
Yeah, because it's sort of like it's establishing the story and this kind of thing, and just the idea that you can have a huge failure state and it's not very replayable in the nature of it means it's very hard to, like, you know, actually replay it from that failure state. And I think that was one of those big disadvantages of it. I always found the idea of the story was interesting, but it gets in the way for that one. That's definitely one of those. And that comes down to a board game that's not very replayable, which is an entirely different discussion, which I don't even remember if we've talked about. Maybe it's for another day, is non-replayable board games.
I think, you know, the other question we need to ask is what board games can be enhanced with lore? Because really, I think Monopoly has the chance to have some really deep lore, because really, who is Mr. Pennybags? The omnipresent man telling you to go around and around the board as you land on squares and your friendships slowly diminish over time.
Well, I mean, there is that definitely thing there, too, of, like, certainly plenty of games, like, I think, for less jokes, something like Catan, I could probably give a version of that that's a little bit more enhanced with a little more lore. If you gave, like, factions that you like you know, oh, you get a certain bonus for doing something, you know, as a character.
Like there is a version of Catan that is that.
It's like a Star Trek Catan that does that, you know, which is a licensed one. But I mean, like, for just standard Catan itself, could build a version of that that's like not Star Trek. But that also leads to there's a bunch of board games that can just be, oh, it's Star Trek this, it's Star Wars this, it's Lord of the Rings this, it's this, like, you know, other franchises or medias that are just put on top of these board games, and it replaces the kind of storyline of it, and that kind of shows off in places where, like, either the storylines are very weak to the gameplay, or, like, they're just extra, as we said, they're just, like, an extra fun thing. You know,
They're to sell a box.
Yeah, they're there to sell a box. And, I mean, like, I don't always mind that thing, too. It's there to sell a box. We have this game with these mechanics. I just feel like I have this game with this mechanics, and it tells the story sometimes a little better. Going back to when I mentioned Everdale, a lot of the mechanics and the way you do things is like, oh, I've got to get building supplies and food supplies and stuff like that. And, you know, you get the feeling that you are doing city building and, like, you know, management for a season to survive, which is a very interesting concept, and honestly, you know, it translates into the cards. I know you could probably come up with an entirely different story, an entirely different thing on top of it, but at least it feels like their version of the story translates into how things are presented in a very good way, that it makes it feel integrated into that. Like, again, with Catan, you don't really integrate a story into Catan, it's just, you build some shit and, you know, do it there.
Catan itself tells a story.
Yeah, which is also how the arguments and ending friendships, but you know, that's any board game with large amounts of competition and possibly screwing over people. When you just build roads around someone and lock them into a corner.
That was very personal. I feel like that's happened to you guys. I feel like that's something I may have done to you at one point.
Possibly. But that's also probably happened a few times to me. Where I'm
I feel like that's something you do to me all the time in Stellaris.
That's me being very bad at,
you
like...
getting into the multiplayer game?
Oh, God, I can do multiplayer like Civ very well, because it's sort of like the way that you expand in the borders makes sense in my brain. It doesn't work that same way in Stellaris. For whatever reason, my, like, I guess it's because, like, there are natural boundaries and stuff which I have to keep in mind a lot more in Civ, so that I always, like, plan out my expansion within that boundaries. While in Stellaris, it's sort of like, I can just blob out in every direction, so, like, not blobbing out in every direction doesn't, like, affect my brain as much.
Well, you need all the space for the billion mega structures you have to compulsively build.
I just really
and
love
spam my game with notifications that this empire has built a mega structure that I don't give a shit about.
At least I don't build habitats. They might be fixed now. I don't know. I don't know if that updates.
They did fix habitats. Oh, they changed habitats entirely in the new update.
I've got to try that. I haven't tried it the last couple of updates just because
I haven't played Stellaris in, like,
I think a DLC like just came out.
I'll take a look. I'll have to take a look. You know, one of these books. But it again, it comes down to, like, it's so interesting to see, like, where that difference is between being directly linked to lore and it just lore sort of being there, and, like, again, I feel like those links makes the game stronger rather than, like, you know, if someone had given me, like, a one-page lore thing from Catan, I probably would never goddamn read it, because it's like, why does that matter? It doesn't matter the gameplay at all, you know. Or I might read it the first time just to, like, find it out and then forget all about it. Just because the gameplay doesn't feel like it's linked to anything. Anyway, I guess, like, if you really want your deep dives into non-RPG related tabletop lore, play a miniatures game, because they're gonna
yes, miniatures games are designed to be played over a long period of time and are typically attached to either real-world history or an existing IP like 40K or Warhammer or Star Wars.
I mean, even some of those big ones, like the I would say something like, if I would take a lesser miniatures board game like the Curse of Strahd one, the old D&D one. I mean, I'm sorry, that still establishes a huge amount of, like, lore in their adventures and the way they set up things and their monsters. And I mean, I'm sorry, I've mentioned it before. The trap card, or no, the event card, Strahd shows up fireballs your party and leaves, says so much about that world, with the big boss just coming up and being like, fireball, all right, I'm done. You know, it's like, oh, you lived? Oh my. It's just such, like, it's a dick move, but it establishes a lot of, like, feeling in the kind of way that the world's established in. And I think they do, like, a good job with stuff like that, where it has a lot. You know, certainly, like, Betrayal, which I mentioned is kind of like in a weird, that the adventures you take on are the story, still has a decent chunk of lore. I mean, like, the weird events and little hauntings that happen feel like they could be in a weird horror movie or something, and just you then have a actual, like, story that's random layered on top of it. Which is just so unusual about that. You know, when I think about it as, like, a storyline kind of thing, is you're doing a haunted story, and then halfway through, you actually get the real story. You know, it's like, it's almost like it's a generic scary movie for half of it, and then, like, all of a sudden, oh, and by the way, you've got, like, werewolves, or by the way, there's vampires, or, you know, our version of, like, Jason shows up, or, you know, something like that.
Or 5 hags in a windmill.
That's Curses. Wasn't it? It's a 3, but still.
It's 3.
It's a bunch of hags in a windmill. It is Curse of Strahd. I distinctly remember this because when I played in Curse of Strahd, we got to watch our dear friend's character get eaten alive by hags. And then we took his arm, ran away, and revived him via his arm. And that character was terrifically traumatized for the rest of the game because he was eaten alive by hags.
That is a really terrible way to go. Not gonna lie. That's pretty awful. Wow. Ugh. Yeah. Yeah, I do like when there's, like, at least a little bit of a story to a board game, but again, I guess it's to each our own for how much we enjoy that kind of integration of story versus board game, and how much our limit is. Like, I do like playing something like a Catan, or, you know, going back even, like, when you mentioned Monopoly. I like playing Clue, you know, occasionally, but Clue has jack shit for story. I mean, it's got a little bit of one, because it's the object.
Lore.
It does have lore. It's you're trying to solve a murder. And, you know, I mean, the Clue movie's really good. I recommend that. It actually feels like Clue without it also being a comedy. Honestly. It has a lot of that. Anyway, that's my movie suggestion for the day. You can probably find it somewhere for either cheap or monster online. Is there anything else on this one here? Or we kind of, like, dove through the idea of this here?
I mean, we covered a lot of points. I mean, basically, there's basically 3 ways you get lore. There's ones that have no lore, but there's ones that get it from an IP, and then there's ones that, or an existing lore base, and there's those that have self-contained lore, and those that are part of a continuation of lore, like we mentioned, are very rare, or...
Yeah. And so you get one of these directions, and you just see it, and honestly, again, there are very simple card games and board games that tell really complex stories. I don't know why they do, but sometimes they do. Maybe because they're part of that ongoing, like, series of board games. They're like, and we also did this one. It's this thing that's going on as part of our lore. And I'm just, like, matching 2 cards together. Why do I have, like, complex super lore? Shall we talk about our week in tabletop? Did anybody do anything last Sunday? We'll start with.
Did I get something on Sunday?
I've been playing Baldur's Gate all week.
We had things on Sunday. We continued our pirating in a different game. Lightning is running a pirate-based adventure. Where we've contacted and dispatched horrific colonialist gnomes who are trying to colonize our shitty island full of kobolds and fish people. No, we fought some kobolds. No, we fought some fish people. and sleep has been a very disgusting spell for the adventure. Also, our druid cast shatter on all of us and killed us all.
Well, that sounds like a that happened kind of moment.
We survived, but they did cast shatter on us and down all of us except for Cell.
Ouch.
Take out at least like 3 kobolds, so you know.
Oh, that's a good question. Why?
They were surrounded by kobolds. And they thought we could live.
They thought wrong.
Hey, you know what? It was funny. That's all that matters.
Sometimes that is all that matters.
It's comedy.
I guess, Worm, because you have been playing all week, how's Baldur's Gate going?
Yeah, so I've been streaming in evenings during the week now. And basically, I just murdered a whole city of Dwergar. Small city of Dwergar, murdered them all.
They deserve it, probably.
They most of them do.
Yeah,
There's
no,
like one chill
they're,
Dwergar in that building, or that city. There's like one chill guy, and that's it.
It's just the unfortunate thing that a lot of them are coming from a society. It's really terrible.
They're all slavers.
I literally did it to save the slaves.
Mhm.
But I realized that fighting the... I tried to do the upfront, I'm going to murder you all, let's do this kind of thing. Died horribly. And then I went the sneaky approach and just started murdering them off one by one.
Did you save the guy yet in there?
The guy in the cloud? Yeah, I did. And
So, I, in my solo game, this is Baldur's Gate time now, this cannot stop me.
I can't stop.
I went to my camp one too many times, exited my camp, and everyone in that room was dead because the poison gas killed them all.
Oh!
So I didn't have to fight the guy, but the people I was supposed to save all died, so oops.
Okay, so the gnomes weren't happy either.
I don't think the gnomes gave a shit, I'll be real.
They are kind of strangely...
It's hard for gnomes to
different.
care when they all died to poison gas.
Well, there were, like, 4 on the outside, which are trying to get in.
Fine, I'll feed them to mushroom people, it's fine.
Okay.
They did their job. They died hard.
They got me some boots that let me bonus action dash, so they're expendable now.
Nice. Bonus action dash.
Is that random?
No, if
think
if you give the one the antidote, you get some boots that let you bonus action dash.
Oh. I did give her the one all the way in the back. Yeah, I did give her the antidote. I don't remember.
You
getting
should have
those.
some boots that let you dash.
Might be somewhere in your inventory.
Probably somewhere in an inventory full of garbage. Because that's all fucking Baldur's Gate inventory ends up being. It's just like an inventory full of trash.
It is.
It's Larian Studios' curse. His inventory's full of
so
trash.
many magic items that are just worthless.
Just steal everything and then you've got me who's stealing everything that's not nailed down.
There's a stool in the Underdark that when you sit on it, it grants you giant strength, but only when you sit on it.
That's a thing. Alright, well, that was Baldur's Gate for the week. Did anyone do anything on Monday?
I didn't do anything on Monday.
Nope.
Tuesday?
I ran my game, additional game. I run a sci-fi game now. That's just the thing that's happening. They're all bounty hunters hunting terrorists on Mars. They tracked some down, had some arguments about cameras, and then they captured a terrorist, stabbed him. Not sure why. Well, they wanted to threaten him. Threats didn't work, so then Lightning wanted to threateningly stab the guy, and then Lightning crit on the stab and killed him. Or rather, reduced him to 0 HP. So then they brought them back to their safe house, revived him. Great plan, by the way. Revived him, then just let him leave after they got some information, and then he made some kind of phone call, and now their safe house is under attack. Weird how that worked out. Weird. Really weird how letting the fanatical terrorist to go led to you getting attacked.
That's just a weird thing, you know?
It's a weird coincidence.
Yeah, very weird.
Oh yeah, and then lightning executed the dude with the magic missile.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, last week I mentioned there's a programming thing I'm working on. I got that to work. Apparently there's just a major bug with one of the things right now.
Ooh, jeez.
But thankfully I figured out how to work around.
Wednesday was a fun time. You guys didn't come to blow with Yakul.
I feel like we would have killed him.
Probably. He is just a dude with a hammer.
And this is the thing that I don't... One River was trying to avoid PvP, which is good, because PvP sucks ass. But Misty is built to specifically counter dudes with swords.
It's another one of the reasons I did not want to have the final battle, because I looked at the guy's sheet and I'm like, he's just a fucking
dude with a sword.
He's
Every boss in that game has been a man with some kind of melee weapon.
The bosses are...
It's Dark Souls 2.
That is Skulls and Shackles, the final adventure, just Dark Souls 2. You're not wrong. Oh god. You're not wrong about that in this case. Look, you know, this is the thing I have to say about Adventure Pass. From all my experience, they're not known for good bosses. They really aren't. Maybe it's something about Pathfinder First Edition, but I will always remember. I'll give a good example. Rise of the Rune Lords, the first adventure. The boss is Quasit Spellcaster with a tiny dagger. It's sort of threatening. It's not a lot of levels. It's mostly Quasit, and when you defeat it, it has a +2 tiny dagger. We couldn't get rid of that thing because the joke was, who would buy a tiny dagger? It's like it's
steak knife. Right?
It's a toothpick. It was like a +1 keen dagger or something. So it's actually
that's a dagger to a gnome, right?
I know, but it's like 1 damage it dealt because it was so small. But anyway, jokes aside. Yakul had a spirit meeting with his father because he basically... I try to explain this in a good way, but it's sort of like when you've been tasked by a god who's very neutral, and you're like, I'm going to go do this thing that's obviously not neutral, that's not related to my task, that's probably going to get me killed. The god's like, can someone talk to this guy at least about something, you know? Get him to maybe either not do his job or do his job, you know? So that was the entire thing. And apparently, somehow I talked him somewhat down. I don't know. It maybe just, you know, River went along with it a little bit, but I did my job of trying to, you know, talk Yakul down, and I guess there was some, like, closure on father issues, because I'm like, yeah, your father wasn't completely an asshole. He's just an idiot and kind of an asshole.
Runs in the family, apparently.
Yeah. So that was a good time. So we're gonna have the finale next week because, like, a lot of stuff was resolved very quickly, and honestly, there's not really much more to do.
I mean this in the nicest possible way. Thank God that game is ending.
It's this kind
of... That game has been 2 years.
Yeah, it went a lot longer than I was planning. I was planning for maybe, like, a year, maybe. Nope.
2 years.
A lot of stuff happened, though.
2 years of nonsense. Nonsense in a dumbass 8 intelligence captain.
I've been learning a lot on how to, like, you know... I think in this case, this adventure with me rewriting it took longer than I wanted, but it also took longer because I had a lot more to rewrite, because it was back to such a weird corner, and I basically had to scrap, like, 90% of what the adventure was. Which sucks. You know, so it's sort of like, I gotta get rid of 90% of it. I can't really use most of this. It's sort of like second naval battle and 2 dungeons that are really like, just, how will you do those 2 dungeons in one time without resting? You're not going to. Sorry, resting in the middle of dungeons, it doesn't make a lot of sense most times. And this one, where you're going against a guy, really doesn't make sense. Because he knows you're fucking coming. Anyway, we're finishing up this segment. Thursday, I was in a game.
You were in a game where you play a Hambo with 8 intelligence.
I have 10 intelligence, thank you.
You don't act like it.
The way I act like it is, I'm not supposed to be acting like 8 intelligence. I'm supposed to act like I have no education and I can be taught. That's the idea that I've been trying to go for. I haven't quite got there.
A fucking office chair, dude.
I thought about it afterwards, and I think that was just me being tired and late at night.
It's still an office chair. You took a man's chair.
He was probably dead or evil.
Anyways, Cityrin got attacked by void monsters.
Yeah.
And then you fought a horrific void monster that almost killed 3 of you.
Did beat the shit out of him.
Also, there was a horse there for some reason. Don't know why. And now you're going to an underwater ruin to find a weapon. Also, Lightning got a new character introduced.
Yay, new character.
Lightning is now playing a 7-foot-tall rabbit woman.
Yay, giant rabbit woman.
Giant woman.
Sometimes you just gotta play a giant woman.
That's most of my characters.
Yeah. So that sounds. It was a pretty good times. Pretty good times. I do enjoy that game, even though, like, I gotta be honest, it's sort of like this. I know, like, so it was like, we totally explained to your character, and I'm like, you didn't explain to me, so I really can't act
them
in
to
character.
fill in the gaps. They didn't.
They didn't. Like, I'm like
busy when you were making your character. I'm like, this cell will tell them.
I know, but it's sort of like, it's really funny, but like, we totally told your character. I'm like, I'm gonna play it like you probably didn't tell them, really, that you sort of told them and thought you told them, because you didn't tell me.
Yeah,
I can't react.
Too long, don't read. Yeah, you're in the midst of the start of a planar war.
Yeah. I mean, that's as much as I figured. It's like, invasions from another plane.
It's a planar invasion. It's bad.
Yeah.
A lot of people are gonna die. You gotta stop it. It's that kind of game.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess it's like, I do feel like there's part of my character that's like, where were people when my continent was kind of devastated here?
I know. People did come and help you, eventually.
Yeah. I figured out what my background finally was. Is I traveled from there to get money and supplies to help fight undead. That's the entire reason I went across.
There's still kind of a problem on that continent. After 30 years.
Yeah, that's why I figured, I'm in the better place, but there's still a problem with that. So I'm like, let's find some magic things.
Half
and,
that continent is still infested with undead.
That's why I kind of figure, that's a good reason for my character to travel across the world to a place where they might be able to get that, earn some money to buy things, or
you work for one of the legendary heroes that stopped the Lich.
That makes sense then. Hey, so Anna, did anybody do anything on Friday?
Like Baldur's Gate.
I
can't really talk about it because it's Act 3 stuff, but
save the spoilers.
I'm still in Act 1.
I have not gotten beyond Act 1 because I've played
your
a little bit.
Computer might be a little too old.
It might be, I might not be.
I can talk about Baldur's Gate we did today, and I'll just mention one thing. Lynn's character had bear sex.
So, played up what they showed on the,
Yeah, it was just as weird. But very comical.
Weird, but comical.
Lynn's been trying to get with Astarion, but Astarion has been a hard no to Lynn's character, despite having max approval with him. So the joke is that Lynn's just been friend-zoned.
Wow.
Meanwhile, everyone in camp wants to bang my drow for some reason. I don't know why.
Who knows why? Some ones and zeros were crossed.
I can't hear you over smooching my 7-foot-tall tiefling wife.
Warlock is very tall, isn't she?
Yes.
Anyway.
You mentioned you had adventures today, of all days.
Yeah!
Ooh.
I almost didn't make it, because I was playing, So my friend is actively making an RPG. I don't know if he's ever gonna, sell it, but he's just doing it mostly for fun, as far as I understand it.
Okay.
But yeah, so helping him playtest things. I think he has the intention of, but anyway. It's very D&D-esque, although in terms of, the fantasy system. In fact, it started out as D&D that he just heavily modified, but now it's like its own whole beast. Uses 2d10. Yeah, basically we did a sort of trial for initiates into a magic school. I played someone who had, we're level 2. I played someone with 2 warrior levels and put one of my universal points into magic, and that's about the extent I had of magic. It was fun though.
Cool.
The other two actually made me. Well, one of them. So basically, he's got it set up into like 4 classes. One he calls the Jack, which is like Jack of all trades. Mm-hmm. So they get a lot of utility points. It's basically got 3 skill perk areas. One of them is utility. Then you've got martial and magic, and you can either be a Jack, a mage, a battle mage, or a warrior, and those are the classes. So it's a whole thing. Yeah, so you can kind of be a generalist or like a utility person, or you can be like a fighter or a mage. Yeah. Anyway, it was kind of fun. We fought through a dungeon. I played someone who was, again, even though we were mages, I played someone who was very stupid. Well, not stupid, just slow. As I did come to the conclusion of several things that they completely missed. But I definitely let them try to come to the conclusion first, as a player. But I'm like, and then my character realizes this thing is off and nudges it to the side. Fun. Yeah, it was fun. I completely failed at combat. Basically, I needed to get, on 2d10, I needed to get an 8 or higher, to hit this enemy.
That theoretically is not too difficult.
On 2d10, I did the math, that I had an 80% chance of hitting. I had an 80% chance of getting at least an 8 on 2d10. Mm-hmm. I hit 2 out of, 7 attacks. And then we actually had to run away because everyone was so beaten up by that point. Yeah.
Well, sounds like a good time at the least. That's usually important.
It was fun. It was fun. I'll have to give him some feedback later.
I mean, that's the thing is, I've been in that place of playtesting. I think Joe's talked about he had a game that he was working on back years and years ago. That's like, oh God, over a decade ago that he was working on it. I was helping him playtest it. He talks about getting back to it, and I say to him, "Why don't you? We can playtest it more because we know more nowadays. We knew shit 10 years ago or something, when you were trying to invent this. We understand systems and stuff so much better now." Just saying.
Yeah, I do want to say the difference between a level 2 warrior and a level 2 mage is kind of ridiculous. Because, they could do a whole bunch of stuff, and all I really had the ability to do was punch. Bash with my shield and axe. He doesn't... I think he needs to actually separate out, skills and functions, because, he has, weapon skills. He has, 7 weapon skills, then he has, 5 magic skills, and then he's got, 6, universal skills, which include things like crafting and socializing and, but I'm just kind of the fighting ones... I don't know, I feel like you should have more, And also, it's so hard to get points up, because he does a very linear system, but it's, exponential cost. So it's you only get a certain number of points every level, and it's it's exponentially harder to level up. Ugh, it's a whole thing. I'll give him some feedback, though.
Development. Seems neat.
Yeah.
I guess that's all for our week in tabletop, and that kind of leads us to our end today. Ooh. So, do either of you have anything to shout out?
Yes, I have been streaming on weekdays now, late at night. Very late at night for Tantus. I've been starting at 7:30 my time, which would be 10:30 Eastern.
I have noticed you're on that late, and I have been I'm already watching something and tired. I'm probably
Yeah.
By that time, I'm like, I probably should stop by, but I'm also like,
Maybe one of these days. Yeah, but also I'll be streaming it around that time, probably today, because I didn't get my normal stream because I was playtesting with a friend. So I'll probably do a little shorter stream later today, and then I'll have my normal one tomorrow.
Cool. Momo, you have anything to shout out?
Chat. I'm gonna. I'll be real with you. I would like to shout out that I'm gonna be ruining my life for the next several months because there's a new Final Fantasy expansion on the horizon, and I have 6 patches worth of content to play. So that's gonna be my life the next half a year.
Jeez.
So you'll see me talk about it probably on Twitter when I occasionally post something stupid. Or, I don't know, like when Tantus forgets to unmute us on pre-stream for a D&D game.
That's only happened
He
once.
forgets to mute us, and then we talk, but thankfully, we're not rowdy like Children of Wrath was.
I'm really glad that Children of Wrath that never happened.
Very calm people on Wednesdays.
That would have been a thing if it had happened in Children of Wrath. The discussions there were. Oh, you are very tame people in comparison. Very nice and tame people.
Try not to say things that break TOS when there's a button that went live.
Anyway, myself, I'm on stream most days. I'm planning some stuff out for Halloween, figuring that out for October month. Still working on stuff, should have that done. So I'm going to put off the link to the the Link's Awakening randomizer that I'd rolled until next month. And I'm gonna try out getting Biorand, the Resident Evil randomizer, and try some Resident Evil 2 with that on Monday. And then Tuesday, there's a chance I'm not going to be able to do stuff, and then we'll figure out the schedule for the rest of the week from there as I'm trying to establish it. But I am going to try to get some Resident Evils in, like I did last year during this month, and some other things, and get some spooky seasonal stuff, and expect a bunch of that stuff. And maybe I'll try to figure out some more spookier tabletop topics for October, which I have goddamn no idea about that kind of thing. I already talked about Ustalon and Pathfinder, but I'm sure there's some places that I can probably talk about, is it Geb? The one that's the undead capital of Galarian kind of thing. Stuff like that. So.
Yeah. Wasn't it actually Resident Evil last year that got you to think into randomizers? I should do a randomizer for this game.
Yes, because I played through, I think, Resident Evil 1, and I remembered it, and I'm like, hey, people do some randomizers of this. I should probably try those out at some point in time. And I think one of the ones I did end up doing was the RE1 randomizer, the remake one. I tried it once, which was fun, but I didn't go too crazy on that one. So I figured I'm going to try out the classic games a little bit that way, the randomizers, because that makes them a little more, not more fun to play, because you can still play them, but I guess it improves it. So, anyway, as my schedule, make sure to check out things on both the Twitch and YouTube, both on Dracovin Empire. What else is there to shout out? I've got Discord, Twitter.com. Yep. So, I guess that's everything for today. Check all those out. Check these people out. And I'm going to say for now, everybody have a great rest of your Saturday. Hopefully see you next week. And until that time, I bid all of you out there a deep and wholesome farewell.